This is Breaking News.
Good afternoon. I'm Dana Tyler. Police Commissioner Bill Bratton, Mayor Bill de Blasio speaking at NYPD headquarters right now about the death of NYPD police officer Randolph Holder, who was shot and killed in the line of duty last night in East Harlem. We know a suspect is in custody. Let's listen in now.
Is still in motion as the investigation goes forward. You will be briefed on that criminal investigation by Bill Aubrey, Chief of Detectives for Manhattan, who's been leading that investigation. We have a parallel investigation by our Force Investigation Division in that one of our officers did discharge his firearm during the course of this event last evening. So that investigation parallels but is separate from the criminal investigation being conducted by Chief Aubrey. I'm joined at the podium by Mayor de Blasio, who will speak in just a moment. And also I have Chief O'Neill, Chief of Department, Dermot Shea, who is our CompStat Deputy Commissioner, First Deputy Commissioner Ben Tucker, and they will make remarks based on some of the questions that we may receive from you during the course of this press briefing. I want to thank the public at this time for the significant outpouring of sympathy and condolences that we have been receiving, not only from New York, but literally from around the country, including from many of my colleagues that who are certainly well aware of this latest incident here in New York City. With that, let me introduce the mayor to you, and immediately after his remarks that I'll bring up Chief Aubrey to give you an overview of the investigation up until this point in time. Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Commissioner. Well, the city is feeling so much right now. We are feeling a deep sense of loss and mourning. Loss of Officer Holder is hitting us all, and there's something particularly powerful about the fact that he followed in the footsteps of his father and grandfather, devoting his life to protecting others. And he represented the best of our society. He represented our immigrant tradition. He represented our tradition of trying to make this place better for everyone, and made the ultimate sacrifice. So many people, as the Commissioner said, have been reaching out, offering their condolences, their prayers for his family. And we feel deeply for his second family, the NYPD, and particularly the members of PSA 5 who are feeling this tragedy so personally and so deeply right now. I also want to thank our elected officials with us in solidarity. I want to thank Speaker Melissa Mark Viverito and Public Advocate Tish James, who were also with us last night at the hospital. This is a reminder of all that has to be done to keep our city safe. It's a reminder of our constant focus on keeping our officers safe as well. And the NYPD works every day to achieve both those goals. There are a small number of people in this city, they number in the thousands, who perpetrate so much of the violence. And the NYPD every day is pursuing them relentlessly, more and with more tools and better tools than ever before. And we will not stop in that relentless pursuit of these violent few. There's several things that just need to be said quickly. The first is our officers do so much every day to protect us, and yet they grapple every day with an unrelenting flow of firearms into this city from outside. There's a disconnect in our society that somehow people who say they believe in law and order still support the notion of the free flow of weapons. And so often it is our officers who pay the price. We pray that this tragedy sheds a little more light on that reality so that we can protect our residents and officers alike. Second, there's something we have to address in our criminal justice system, because the perpetrator involved here was obviously a hardened, violent criminal and should not have been on the streets. So there's more we have to do, and more our criminal justice system has to do because that's one of the ways we will protect our communities and our officers alike, is to ensure that individuals like this are just not on our streets. And finally, this tragedy is being felt so deeply, but it's being felt in the wake of other tragedies, tragedies that have touched every corner of this city. The officers we've lost represent the best of us, and they also represent every element of us. They come from all the communities that make up this city. Each one of them was different, but they had a common, strong bond. They believed in protecting others, and they were willing to put their lives on the line. We have felt pain in so many different neighborhoods and so many different families. So it's a moment for us to show solidarity and to understand the bond we need to have between all of us and our police. We need to understand that the police are us. They are made up of every community, every type of New Yorker. It's a moment to dig deeper and find that solidarity that we need. I know Commissioner Bratton has devoted his entire career to fostering that bond and creating that sense of solidarity. I urge all New Yorkers today to reflect upon this moment and do something simple. Thank the police officers you come across today, because they're in pain. Every single one of them is in pain. They have lost a member of the family. That's another step towards creating the bond between police and community that will make us a better city and make us safer. We will never forget Officer Holder, everything he represented, everything he did for us. We will keep his memory alive. God bless him and his family.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm going to ask Detective Chief of Manhattan, William Aubrey, to give you an update of the situation as we understand it as of this time. Billy.
Thank you, sir. I just want to remind everybody, we're at the preliminary stages of this investigation. We're 17 hours into it. We've been working with the Force Investigation Division, and we've been working with the Manhattan District Attorney's Office. I'm going to take you through 13 minutes which led up to the death of Police Officer Holder. So at 8:30 last night, at 420 East 102nd Street and the FDR Drive, there were two housing police officers on the roof of one of the locations. They hear and they see individuals firing weapons at each other. We know from the evidence that we recovered at the scene that there were at least 3 firearms that were used during this shooting that transpired on the street. These officers called over a radio transmission. They asked for assistance, and there were numerous police officers that responded. One of the individuals, Tyrone Howard, ends up fleeing towards the FDR Drive. He goes towards the FDR Promenade, and he flees northbound. When he approaches 106th Street and the Promenade, he encounters an individual that was sitting there enjoying a nice night, and he produces a firearm and takes his bicycle. He uses that bicycle to continue northbound along the promenade when additional officers see him and they radio transmission over. Police Officer Holder and Police Officer Wallace were at the 120th Street walkway that would lead you on to the promenade. So they're on the street side. They hear this transmission come over. They hear the description. And what they do is they see 3 individuals walking over the walkway. They follow these 3 individuals, and when they realize that these 3 individuals have nothing to do with the original shots fired, they're on the ramp heading down towards the promenade when Tyrone approaches them on the bicycle. When he approaches them on the bicycle, he puts the bike down, he pulls out his weapon, and he fires 1 time, striking the officer in the front of the head. Police Officer Wallace is now currently next to Police Officer Holder, and the individual, Tyrone, continues to proceed towards Officer Wallace. Officer Wallace discharges his firearm, and that's when Tyrone proceeds northbound on the promenade. There were additional officers that were in the area, and they apprehended Tyrone on the FDR Drive at 124th Street, between 124th Street and 125th Street, where he was apprehended. Once again, we're 17 hours into this investigation. There's numerous video evidence, witnesses, physical evidence, DNA evidence that we're combing through to establish a case with the Manhattan District Attorney's Office. We currently have Tyrone Howard in the 2-5 detective squad, and he's going to be standing lineups later today for the robbery of the bicycle, in addition to the shots fired, and we'll work with the Manhattan District Attorney's Office as far as the charges for murder of Police Officer Randolph Holder. Thank you.
Excuse me, questions?
On topic question, do you know if she was being sought, did he have any outstanding warrants? We also heard that some people might have been harboring him in the Wagner houses. Or anything like that?
Chief O'Neill can speak to the efforts we've been making based on the warrants outstanding for him to apprehend him over these last several weeks. Jimmy?
Hey, good afternoon, everyone. Tyrone Howard was wanted for a shooting on September 1st. The Manhattan Violent Felony Squad had the case, made numerous apprehension attempts, obviously negative results. The last effort was on the 16th. They've visited numerous locations. He had a couple of court appearances. They went to court. He was a no-show at court. I think he also had an active warrant, so we were hunting him, but obviously unsuccessful. That was, Billy could probably do a little bit of better job at that, but that was on September 1st. It was a shooting towards an East Army gang member, and he was ID'd, and we've been hunting him since then.
Commissioner, also there, can I ask you both the same question? Correct me if I'm wrong, this is the fourth officer who shot and killed in one shooting in just the last 11 months. I can't remember a string like this in a long, I've been 15 years, so I can't remember. Is there something going on? Is there something unique as to why we're seeing so many officers in a relatively short period of time shot and killed?
No. Nature of policing, nature of law enforcement, there is always an element of randomness to it. These 4 incidents, while occurring in a close period of time, different. As you recall, Ramos and Liu, detectives Ramos and Liu, were assassinated. In terms of Officer Brian Moore, was engaged in attempting to do a stop of a suspect who immediately turned and fired, killing Officer Moore. The event last evening, 2 plainclothes anti-crime officers were responding to a shots fired call and were attempting to stop the suspect who pulled out a firearm and shot at them before they had an opportunity to return fire. So the 4 incidents, while in close proximity, very different areas of the city. It is unfortunately a part of American life today that even though crime has been reduced dramatically in our country, and no more so than here in New York City, overall crime in the city, through the hard work largely of the men and women of the New York City Police Department, is down 80%, including homicides, shootings. But there is still crime that remains. And the officers in this city are working very hard, as the officers last night, in every instance that Chief Aubrey spoke about, officers running toward the danger, a lot of police officers in the area, so we had a lot of police in the area very quickly. But we are dealing, as the mayor referenced, with a core element in our population that is still involved in carrying firearms, still willing to use those firearms. So it is a very vivid and very tragic reminder of the need that, even as we in the country are attempting to reduce the number of people in prison, that there are some people that have to be in prison. And we need to work harder to ensure that they get to prison, and more importantly, that they stay there. And this individual that we believe murdered our police officer last night, your police officer, he was a New York City police officer, he was mine, he was ours, but he was yours also, that he's a prime example of what we're talking about. People that engage constantly in violence, but we seem to have the hardest time trying to keep them in jail or prison. So that's an area of focus, even as we, in a well-intended way, are attempting to deal with those who don't necessarily need to be in prison, need to be in treatment, need to be doing other things, so as to free up space for those who must be put into prison. And we're working very hard to do that. Thank you.
Anti-police mentality, which is fostering maybe emboldening people with guns?
I think we have, among the criminal element, there has always been a hostility toward the police and a reaction to any type of police enforcement action. I would point out that overall crime in the country, in this city, is down dramatically, and that includes assaults against our personnel, but that from time to time those incidents do spike. There is no denying that in this country over the last several years there has been an anti-police attitude that has grown, and that's unfortunate, because while we do have problematic officers in our ranks among our 800,000, the vast majority of the 800,000, like the officers last night, continually, on behalf of the citizens of this city and this country, go toward the danger, put their lives on the line, and last night, as we saw, lost a life to trying to protect everybody else. So this is an issue that we need to be mindful of, that we need to try to find some balance in the national debate that's underway at this time, so that we don't foster or encourage those that think that they are being supported when they exhibit anti-police behavior or attitudes.
Commissioner, you have said this to in prison. The mayor has said the system failed and you should have been in prison. You hear about 18 final arrests on robberies, drug dealing, attempted sex attack on women in the elevator. Why was he not on the street?
You've made the case. He's been in and out of jail. That you will probably have to talk to the district attorney's office relative to why he's out. He was arrested as part of a major operation in that housing development last year that we took a lot of pride in, because a lot of work went into the arrest of about 19 individuals, including him. And our understanding is that he may have been out on a diversion program, that if ever there's a candidate not to have been diverted, it would be this guy. He's a poster boy for not being diverted. So the district attorney's office will look into the circumstances of that diversion. And it's the point I'm making, that even as we're attempting to try to find balance, it's unfortunate that there are people in our city, in our society, that despite our best efforts, that are they're criminals. And many of them are violent criminals, and we need to separate them from the rest of us. And this individual, I think, is one of those.
You're looking in retrospect, perhaps, though, this man allegedly shot one of your officers now, but struggle with this, reconcile. How do you
No, this is our I'm hearing it.
Would in fact be kept in jail or put back in jail. My own perspective on it: if you use a firearm and shoot another individual, that you should be in jail. You shouldn't be diverted, and you should receive the stiffest sentence possible and serve that sentence. As we seek to let people out of jail, we need to be very careful who we're letting out, and we also need to be much more assertive on who we put in. And we are currently dealing at this time, and Jeremy Shea has reported on this the last several months, and indeed when we have our crime briefing with you in early November, we are continuing to see growth in parolees committing crimes and being victims of crimes when they come out of prison. And that's an issue of concern as we're letting people out. But the issue is really that we need to find some common ground on this, in this time of national debate, that there is a core element in the criminal community that, I'm sorry, that when you go out and shoot somebody, when you go out and murder somebody, we've got to put you away. We've got to get you away from the rest of us.
I just
diversion was offered after the
I can't speak to the diversion. You'll have to speak to the district attorney's office on the particulars of that.
about whether your best strategies and efforts to curtail violence in public housing seems to be impervious upon certain populations.
In some instances, that is the case. In many others, that it works, that there are many people in jail that are there appropriately. The effort that we made last year with the district attorney, in which there were 19 arrests, including this individual, that some of those individuals are, in fact, serving prison time, if I understand it correctly. And so this is the constant balance that we're working on. But this event of last evening is a reinforcement that even in this climate of letting people out of jail, we need to be selective of who comes out, but we also must not step back from the understanding and appreciation that some people have to be in jail. And that's the balance. I'm sorry? I'll speak for myself. My understanding of this individual's track record, he would have been the last person in New York City I would have wanted to see in a diversion program. He has shown no propensity, with the number of arrests over a many-year period of time, for changing his ways. And as we saw recently, his whole life has been about an escalation of crime, criminal activity, including what we allege occurred on September 1st. And that's what we were seeking him for, was the September 1st shooting. And now, a month later, we have the murder of a New York City police officer. So again, diversion programs that, while well-intended, if not used in an appropriate way, are inappropriate for some people in our criminal justice system. Mr. Mayor?
Thank you. Let me contextualize this for a moment. Under Commissioner Bratton, the focus has been more and more on those thousands, and they are in the thousands only, of truly hardened violent criminals who cause a disproportionate amount of the violence. And that is part of the reason why you've seen an increase this year compared to last in gun arrests. I think it's 164 more gun arrests this year than last year, because the energies of the NYPD are being focused on the truly bad guys. When you think about it, there's a real imbalance in the discussion. The Commissioner rightfully says, how do you strike that balance point? We know that tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of people who committed nonviolent crimes ended up with serious time in jail or prison. But meanwhile, we also know that some people who had a very clear history of violence never ended up in prison. That's a world out of balance. That's something we have to fix. So I agree entirely with the Commissioner. While it's absolutely appropriate to address the inappropriate mass incarceration that's pervaded this nation for decades, we have to make that reform. And that revolves around drug offenses and other nonviolent offenses first and foremost. When it comes to truly hardened violent criminals, it's appropriate that they be in prison. And when you look at the offenses that this individual committed, they were consistent and they were violent. I don't know the details of how his case was handled by the judge, but I do know that someone like this shouldn't have been on the streets. By the way, the individual who killed Officer Moore, who had a long history of violence and a documented history of mental health problems, shouldn't have been on the streets either. We can't say clearly enough whether he should have been in a secure mental health facility or whether he should have been in a prison, but he sure as hell shouldn't have been on the streets. So we've got to have the ability to say that ending mass incarceration is right, because that speaks largely, overwhelmingly, to nonviolent crimes. But when it comes to a consistent pattern of violence, people cannot be left loose to hurt their fellow New Yorkers and hurt our police officers. It's as simple as that. What the NYPD is doing right, despite that ridiculous flow of guns into the city, is they're more and more focused on the true perpetrators of violent crime. They're more and more focused on where the guns are. They're getting better and better results. But it would be fair to the men and women of the NYPD and the people of the city to see a more consistent approach to prosecuting those who are consistently violent.
I may two follow-on comments. One in 2009, I think it was, as part of the trying to the reformation of the Rockefeller drug laws, the power to divert was taken away from the district attorneys as far as approval and given to the judges. And so the issue of who controls diversion changed dramatically in 2009 as part of the reformation of the Rockefeller drug laws. So details of this particular diversion that I don't have intimacy, so discussion certainly with the district attorney's office would be appropriate for the details, but my understanding of diversion, it is now controlled by the judges with some potential influence by the district attorney, and to the best of my understanding, we don't have a role in it, and I believe that we, the police, because we're the ones that are encountering these individuals, should have a role. Secondly, and ironically, I was scheduled to be in Washington today and tomorrow, today for a conference on the issue of people coming out of prison, and very specifically speaking to the federal release soon to be of 40 or 50,000 individuals. And tomorrow a meeting was going to be held with President Obama on that issue. The points I was going to bring into that discussion, while I'm supportive of the idea, as you've seen clearly during my time as police commissioner, of efforts to reduce arrests, reduce summonses, reduce some of our activity as it relates particularly to minor drug types of crimes, marijuana, and other issues, that what is missing in this effort, and it is a big miss, is that currently at the federal level, oftentimes at the state and local level, as people are coming out of jail, they're coming out into an environment in which there is nothing there for them. The concern I have with the federal release of prisoners at this time is that all well and good if they're deemed to be nonviolent, many of them are serving long prison terms, but they'll be coming back into communities in which there are no jobs, there are no services, there's no housing. Oftentimes the families have dissolved during their time in jail. So there is not a safety net, and the expectation, the concern, the warning, if you will, the red flag that I'm raising, and that some of my colleagues are raising in the law enforcement community, is that we can expect to see those individuals reverting back to a life of crime. Some of them, even when they're given opportunities, will go back to that life of crime because that's what they are, as criminals. But in this national debate we're having at this juncture, with many in law enforcement, such as myself, supporting the idea that a lot of people in jail don't have to be there. They should be in treatment. They should be in other types of environments where they're monitored, where they're mentored. That is not happening with the current infusion of prisoners coming out of the jail. Certainly not happening with the 50 or 60,000 federal prisoners. Not happening to a great degree of the prisoners coming out of our state prison, and to a degree not happening in some instances coming out of our jails. So that's something that we're going to have to deal with. Otherwise, we're going to see so many of these people become like the suspect in this event last night. They're going right back to their lives of crime. Yes?
Any death would be difficult, but in the past less than a year, we've seen 4 officers killed in the city, including 2 assassinated. Can you just give us some idea of how this affects the morale of the officers and of their families in the department?
There's an irony here that there is nothing that brings police officers closer together than the death of a police officer, and particularly in circumstances like we've seen for the 4 officers who've been murdered in this city this past year. That it brings officers together in the sense of the things that bind them together, the oath of office, the sense of camaraderie, the need to be there to support each other, because every one of them, the 800,000 in this country, the 35,000 here, understand it could be them the next time. And they want to, in a sense, show support for each other, show support to their families, that if something were to happen, we'll be there for the families. And it also brings out a great compassion and caring on the part of the public. I referenced at the beginning of my remarks the outpouring of support, condolence, affection, offers of assistance. Once again this morning, JetBlue, for example, stepped up and said, we will fly officers from all over the country to this funeral. We'll make every arrangement we can for that. We've had any number of our support groups immediately step up to offer financial assistance. So out of this tragedy, the irony is it does bring us all together, and it does remind the public, once again, of the importance and the essence of police and what they do. And in some respects, it washes away for a period of time so much of the negativism that has dominated the discussion over these last couple of years. So does it affect morale? It does, but in some respects, in an ironic way, it reinforces the morale, the sense that officers have of the special nature of what they do, the importance of what they do, the dangers of what they voluntarily do and face each and every day. And I believe it means a lot to them when they see that the vast, vast, vast majority of the public do support them. When they see the outpouring when this funeral is held, as it was for Lou and Ramos and more, when our firefighters basically step out for us and outside every fire station, when people from all over the country express support. So on the morale issue, it is an odd twist, if you will, that this brings us all much closer together.
Mayor, I believe you said that there needs to be a more consistent approach to consistently prosecuting those who are violent. Have you tried speaking with Cy Vance or other district attorneys? Is this something you've been thinking about for a while?
Yeah, this is a source of a lot of concern in the department. It's something we've talked about both in our regular meetings that we have weekly, the Commissioner and I have with his leadership team. It's something we've talked about with the DAs. And look, we understand there are complexities, but the bottom line is simple. I think the Commissioner laid it out exactly correctly. There are people who simply shouldn't be on the streets. And we've got to figure out what series of changes need to happen in the criminal justice system and in our courts to achieve that reality. The fact is, and this is the area where New Yorkers should take some solace, in a city of almost 8.5 million people, the real perpetrators of violence are in the thousands, the single-digit thousands. That's the core of the problem. I think Commissioner hits the nail on the head. We can get those people off the streets and keep them in a prison or other institutional setting. It's going to fundamentally change the reality for our communities, and it's going to protect our officers as well. So yes, that is something we're working on now. It's a complicated task, a lot of decades of history that we have to address in terms of the criminal justice system, but that's what we're focused on.
How are you doing? Commissioner, can you talk about how the department is affected? You talk about how this is a tragic coincidence that you've had 4 officers in less than a year. But talk personally how something like this, after 45 years in law enforcement, that happens. You had a hand. How does that affect you?
My first police funeral was in 1970, Officer Walter Schroeder. I had already been selected and was scheduled to go into the Boston Police Academy when, even before I went into the Boston Police Department, 1 or 2 weeks before I attended that first funeral, Walter Schroeder was assassinated while responding to a bank holdup. And over these last 45 years, I've lost count of funerals of my officers, departments I've led, as well as going to funerals of many other officers in sister agencies. And it never gets easier. I'll be very frank with you, it gets worse each time. It gets worse each time. It was not easy at all last night for the, I don't know how many dozens of times I've stood and told family members that they've lost a son or a daughter, and last night was one of those nights. It was not easy to do. And the irony of it is so often we set out to try and comfort the family, and so often they end up comforting us. That was the case last night. The father he was incredible. And maybe the fact that he was a cop himself in Ghana was behind it, but he was just so stoic, so comforting, and also offered to go into the room where we had almost 100 fellow officers from PSA 5 who were there grieving, many crying. The mayor and I had spoken to them earlier, and he wanted to go in and comfort them in their time of grief. So it doesn't get easier. And we always talk about, and you'll hear me when I deliver the eulogy for this officer that we hope it never happens again. But the reality is, in this world we live in, it will happen again. And we try our best to space them out further. In this unfortunate circumstance, the coincidence of 4 in such a short period of time, the most I've ever dealt with in a short period of time in my career. But we pointed out just the other day at a news conference that we had that back in the 70s, we had a period of time in this city where we were losing dozens of officers every year. The insanity of that time and how far we've come from that insanity. I think the challenge for all of us is, in the midst of all of our well-intended efforts to deal with racial issues, to deal with criminal issues, narcotics issues, that we don't let the insanity once again take hold of us. But believe me, it does not get easier.
Thank you very much, Mr. Thank you.
Thank you all. Okay. Insurance, okay. You want to go upstairs from over there? Okay, great. That's fine. That's yours, sir.
Police Commissioner Bill Bratton, Mayor Bill de Blasio, also the NYPD's chiefs of investigation and department updating us on the investigation after the death of New York City police officer Randolph Holder, killed last night in the line of duty in East Harlem. The mayor expressing, of course, his sympathies for the family and also for the NYPD, and asking places in the city to lower their flags at half-staff in memory of this man, 33-year-old Randolph Holder. Also, we got an update on the man police are calling the suspect, also saying he is a violent criminal who was wanted, had outstanding warrants, most recently September 1st for a shooting. And this man, Tyrone Howard, and that police had been hunting him down on numerous attempts, no show in court. He is in custody now. The investigation updating that it was 13 minutes, we're told by Detective Chief William Aubrey, Deputy Chief of Investigation. 13 minutes last night of what went down in East Harlem. Housing officers first noticing some shots being fired on a rooftop, and one of those individuals, police say, was this man Tyrone Howard, who police say stole a bicycle, then a police officer Holder and his partner shooting police officer Holder in the face, and he died. We'll have more later today. CBS 2 News beginning at 5 and 6. Now back to your regular programming.
This has been Breaking News.